Howdy, varmints and vagabonds. My name's TB Skyn, and I'm terribly sorry about that accent. I've had a few requests in the last couple of days to talk about the High Noon skins because, well, as anybody with two eyeballs could see once the Thresh, Lucian, and Urgot High Noon skins were revealed, they were kind of a different breed from the old cowboy skins that had thus far been the norm in League of Legends. And there's a good reason for that. This is Jared Rosen. He's one of the writers at Riot Games and my close personal Twitter mutual. And he tweeted out this in relation to the High Noon skins being revealed. Perhaps you've been wondering what happened to the High Noon universe. We rebooted it. I was the lead writer. Welcome to High Noon Gothic. So, yeah, pretty much these new High Noon skins are supposed to represent a new direction for the High Noon, for the Western-themed, cowboy-themed League of Legends skin universe. High Noon Gothic. And I'd love to talk about it in detail, but I'm not gonna yet. On Twitter, Katie Anthony, who's one of the senior QAs for skins, was asked, why do the High Noons hate each other? Don't they share the same name? By a Twitter user who was interested. And she replied with, the theme is essentially rebooted. Not quite Frodo, that's Jared Rosen, worked on breathing new life into the yeehaw High Noon you knew. He could elaborate a bit on the new Gothic direction, to which Rosen responds, I want to spoil this part of the story, but I'm not gonna yet. Check back on August 30th. So what's being teased here, I believe, is that on August 30th, some kind of High Noon lore content is gonna come out. Something that expands a little bit on the universe, that tells a little bit more about what's going on with these characters. Like, who are they? Why do they behave in the ways that they do? And if I was a betting man, if I was the gambling kind, if I was in the mood for a little bit of high-stakes poker, I'd take a look at this 30-second teaser and go, that's a really high-quality High Noon Lucian model. That's an impressively modeled and rigged and textured Western town they've got there. There's a lot of work has gone into that, and there's this wonderful high-quality model of Thresh, but it's just kind of there in the distance, in the haze, and they're not really showing it to us. That's a lot of work to put into a character model for a 3D animated thing and then just do 30 seconds and not show it. And by the way, where's Urgot in all of this? Isn't he also supposed to be part of the whole High Noon thing? And so if I was a betting man, I'd say that maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit more to this than what they've shown in the 30-second teaser. Maybe, and I'm hoping I'm right about this, maybe there's a bit of an animated short on the way. It might be too much to hope for. Like, those things come out rarely, I know. But gosh, wouldn't that be something? Maybe it's a comic, maybe it's a piece of writing, who knows what's going to be going on. But nonetheless, whatever the case may be, I'm not going to be looking at the High Noon skins specifically until August 30th. What we're going to be doing instead, though, is talking a little bit about skins in general. Skin lines and skin lore, and what that means for League of Legends, and why Riot have decided to reboot High Noon into this High Noon Gothic universe, because I don't think they're just doing it because some people had a cool idea for 3 skins, and that's why we're going to take all of the other ones and change them to be part of the same universe. I don't think that's the whole of the reason. But first we have to talk a little bit about what High Noon skins are. Like, High Noon is a name of the skins, only 5 skins at this point, like the new Thresh, Lucian, and Urgot, and then Jhin and Twisted Fate. I believe those were the only ones who actually had the High Noon name, but there's a whole bunch of Western and cowboy-themed skins. We have Cowgirl Misfortune, we have Longhorn Alistar, we have Sheriff Misfortune, and we have Desperada Cassiopeia, as well as, I think, Bandito Fiddlesticks. Alongside that, also a Cockmaw skin has been reclassified to be part of the High Noon universe. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the orange one. That's Legacy skin. Nowadays, it's just a recolor, really. And Skarner as well has a skin where he's like an orange desert scorpion, and that's been reclassified to being part of the High Noon universe as well. Now, what's the difference, if you think very generally, what's the difference between these skins, just on a very basic level, as compared to these skins? First of all, I mean, there's the quality of the splash art. I have deliberately chosen to use some of the original splash arts for these skins to kind of show where the skins came from, when they were first released, when they were first conceived of. What kind of aesthetic were they conceived into? What kind of purpose were they created with in mind? And here's the thing. I fully believe that Urgot, Lucian, and Thresh here in these versions are part of a unified, cohesive universe. I believe that they have some kind of story with each other, some kind of history, that there's something going on there that is quite serious and you know, very serious-minded, that very much believes in its own aesthetics, in its own mythology, in its own internal logic. I'm not sure I believe it so much with these, because the old Western-themed skins were just that. They were skins. They were costumes that you could put on your character. And that's very much what skins were back in the early days of League of Legends. It's like, oh, here's a fun costume you can put on your character. It's just, that's all it is. It's a costume. It's a thing you can put on them, and it doesn't really mean that much. It's just silly fun. We don't really put that much thought into it. We make some really cool costumes, and your characters put them on, but they're still just costumes. This is something other than that. These aren't just costumes. These aren't just, oh, let's put some different clothes on the same character. No, these are transformations, full transformations of who these characters are. What would Lucian be if he existed in a kind of high gothic, sort of steampunky, very dark, Western-inspired universe? What kind of person, what kind of character would he be? Well, this. What would Thresh be if we took him away from the Shadow Isles, away from the high fantasy of League of Legends, and put him in a Western-inspired universe? Well, he'd probably be a flaming cow skull who ensnares cowboy souls with a lasso in a kind of ironic inversion of what cowboys' jobs are supposed to entail. What would Urgot be if we took him out of Son and the conflict with Noxus? Well, in a Wild West universe, he might be just the demonic manifestation of all the fears of mechanization come true. Like the worst nightmare of any steampunk universe, a shambling monstrosity of cogs and belts and, you know, steam power tearing towns apart. Right? And this is even embodied. See what's in the background of Urgot? It's a steam train. In the background of what Urgot is, a steam train plowing through the landscape. This is what Urgot embodies, that particular dread, the horror of impersonal mechanization imposing itself on the Wild West. I'm being a little pretentious here, I'm reaching a little bit, I know, but that's kind of, when you look at these skins, you can kind of see that, okay, so Lucian probably has some thematics going on about the corrupting nature of revenge. He took a deal with the devil, and now he's seeking revenge on them, and it's slowly taking him over. It's changing him into a burning, smoldering husk of the man he once was. There's something going on there. It's not really so much of that with these skins, and it's not just down to the quality of the splash arts. It's also down to what's the unifying aesthetic between these four? Like, what's the thing that ties them together as clearly existing within the same universe, where people wear the same kinds of clothes and have the same kind of cultural background? It's not really anything. They don't really have any overlap, except that they're all vaguely Western themed. And if you were to tell me today that, hey, on August 30th, a new series of comics is going to be published by Riot Games detailing the adventures of lady with really huge novelty guns and a cowboy who's kind of ironic because he's a bull, but also a cowboy at the same time, and this cosplayer and a lady who throws snakes at people, I would be like, oh, that sounds funny. That sounds funny. That sounds like a parody comic. That sounds silly and ridiculous, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what I wouldn't say is like, oh, wow, okay, so that sounds like something I could really get into. That sounds like an interesting universe to explore. That sounds like an interesting premise to look into. That sounds like something that might be fun to take a look at. It's like, no, I mean, I'd read a comic based on the Old West, like a silly parody comic where Misfortune is running around with guns bigger than her head in each hand, and Alistar is a cow, but who's also a cowboy. I'd read it, but there's nothing about it that would make me take it seriously. She throws snakes at people. I would never take it seriously. I might take this seriously. Because you could tell me that Urgot is a metaphor for the mechanization of the Wild West, for the imposition of, cold, unfeeling industrialism on an untamed landscape, that he represents, the power of of the steam engine taking over and devouring people, using people as fuel for an industrial machine. And I'd be like, I could see that. Like, I could see that this character is meant to embody that metaphor. You could tell me that Thresh is kind of an embodiment of how being a cowboy is both a life of freedom because you get to roam the great frontier, but you're also trapped by it. You're also tied down by it. It can also be a noose around your neck, that the Wild West is a place that is full of death as much as life, that Thresh can embody these qualities. I would believe you. And if you told me that Lucian... First of all, interesting to have a black man as a protagonist character in a Western fantasy. That's always nice to see. That's an interesting subversion of what the Western genre has traditionally been. Like, in the same vein that something like Django Unchained, like, did a lot by being simply an inversion of the traditional Western hero, and indeed Blazing Saddles, although that's a very different genre thing. And this idea that we are embodying his demonic qualities by setting him on fire, by letting him burn. Okay, so there's burning vengeance thematics going on here. There's something about the corrupting nature of revenge, the danger of taking a deal with the devil, and, you know, the ways in which it can change a person, the ways in which it can haunt you. Like, there's potential, there's room for some really interesting storytelling based on these character designs. That kind of isn't so much here. You could do fun stuff, you could enjoy yourself, you could play around, but I would never take it seriously. And I think that's kind of cutting a little bit to the heart of what the skin strategy has been for Riot for a while now. Now, Riot still has the dress-up skins, the fun skins, the let's put a costume on the character skins. That's your pool party skins, that's pizza delivery Sivir, it's the Galio thing where he delivers chicken. Those are sort of the fun dress-up hilarious Halloween costume skins that really don't mean so much. They're just, let's put a fun costume on the character and have them play around. Don't take them too seriously. There's plenty of those skins left. Like, we have Pantheon as a baker with a baker's chef's hat on top of his helmet, and Olaf running around smacking people in the face with T-bone steaks and stuff like that. Jax being a hockey player, Annie as an emo goth. But then we also have the alternate universe type skins where there is an internal logic to them. Sorry, I had to turn away for a second there. Where there is an internal logic to them, where there is an internal universe. This is, what if Echo was a schoolboy in a magical high school instead of being placed in a high fantasy universe? What if Ari was? Who would Darius be if we reclassified him as a school bully rather than, you know, the leader of a militaristic empire? The Blood Moon skins are an interesting case study in this, because the Blood Moon line, I believe, began with Akali and Shen, who got the original Blood Moon skins, and back then they were just kind of costumes. In the same way that the High Noon skins were costumes, these were just kind of, oh yeah, let's do some sort of Asian-ish aesthetic, demon-inspired aesthetic thing, and it was just meant to be Halloween dress-up costumes, fun costumes. But then over time, as more and more Blood Moon skins got released, Riot began to build a mythology around it, an internal universe, this whole mythology of this world where the Blood Moon comes every once in a while, this Blood Moon cult who summon demons into the world, who go out on these terrible killing sprees, destroying the innocence of the world, and, you know, this whole mythology, this whole pantheon of characters who exist within this very specific aesthetic. And Star Guardians are perhaps the ultimate example of this. Who would Lux be if she was a magical girl? Who would Ari be if she was? What would Soraka be as a magical girl? What would Ezreal be as a magical boy? Like, what if we took these characters and transplanted them into a completely different aesthetic, cultural universe? Who would they be? And again, you can tell rather serious, interesting stories within each of these genres that you just kind of can't within League of Legends itself. Like, you can't really tell a magical girl story in the League of Legends universe in the same way that you can if you set them in a proper magical girl universe. You can't really tell Blood Moon type, you know, Asian demon stories within the auspices of the League of Legends universe as effectively as you can if you give them their own separate whole identity, their own separate universe where they can have their own character dynamics and interactions. You can't really do high school drama, magical high school drama comedy in the League of Legends universe in the same way that you can if you have a separate universe for it. For the same reason you can't really tell a gothic high Western story in the League of Legends universe in the same way that you can if you have a separate one. Now, the reason for this is not just because Riot wanted to be more creative about it. The reason for both releasing skins like that and reclassifying the entire line of Western-themed skins into a unified, cohesive High Noon universe is to allow themselves more opportunities for storytelling, I think. And here's the thing. Think about this from a business perspective. Think about this from the perspective of a company that understands that League of Legends isn't gonna last forever. That League of Legends, the game, may stick around for 10, 15, 20 years more if they play their cards right, but eventually it's gonna go away. A company that knows that someday they're gonna have to become Riot Games and not just Riot one video game and a board game. If you were in a position where you know you need to develop new IPs to work with, where you know you need to develop new universes, new genres, you need to explore new things in order to stay relevant, in order to have a future as a company, wouldn't it be convenient if you could take some of the characters from that old game you were working on, some of the brand recognition, if you could take some of those character dynamics, if you could take some of those relationships, that history, that background, and bring that with you on to your next project? Wouldn't it be practical if, when the time comes that you have to start developing the next big video game from Riot Games, you had this grab bag, this huge pool of interesting narrative universes to draw from, with their own internal mythologies, their own character concepts that audiences were already familiar with, that already had fan bases out in the world, and lots of people who would be willing to go over and give it a try because it's something they're familiar with? Wouldn't that be practical? Wouldn't that be convenient? Wouldn't that be nice to just have all these potential universes for future IPs, for future expansions, for future video games just kind of lying around that you could use as a kind of a springboard? Wouldn't it be nice if you had a bunch of internal writers and artists and creators who already had been trained in developing multiple universes, who had already been trained in developing multiple concurrent IPs, who had already been trained in the production processes that it takes and the archival processes and the management processes that are required for balancing multiple narrative universes within, you know, a single publishing strategy? Wouldn't it be convenient if you already had all these things in place before it became urgent? I don't know that Riot are ever going to do a full Star Guardian video game. I hope so. I don't know that they're ever going to do a full Blood Moon comic book series, although I really hope so. I don't know if they're ever going to execute on any of these premises fully. But from a business perspective, it's a lot better to have done this work in advance than to try and do it in a hurry when all of a sudden it becomes clear that your big cash cow isn't really giving so much milk anymore, that the IP that has kept you relevant for almost a decade now isn't going to do it anymore. To have something else ready to go, to have something else prepared. So from a business perspective, I think that's why Riot are shifting the High Noon skins into their own separate universe, because it's useful. It's just good to have around. It's good to have this as an option. It's good to have this deep little pocket of IPs that you can kind of draw from when you need it. Because if you don't have them when you need them, well, then you're in trouble. Anyway, I think that is about all I really had to say on the subject. So, if you've enjoyed this video, if you have any comments, you can feel free to leave them down below. There's a like button for your convenience placed just below the video that you can click on. If you have a dollar that you don't need each month, that's like, it's okay if that dollar isn't in your bank account at the end of the month, because like, you'll be okay. You're not gonna miss out on anything. You're not gonna have to eat ramen to get by. And you don't mind me having that dollar, then you can go on over to Patreon, and if you want to help me out, I really do appreciate it, because that's why I'm able to do videos on sometimes a daily basis, because I have that space. I have that space from other work to dedicate to this nonsense. If you have any suggestions for future video topics, by the way, feel free to put them down in the comments down below. I can't take a lot of requests all the time because there's always so much to talk about, but every once in a while, I'll be at a loss for something to talk about, and that's when I go into my comments and I just look what people have been commenting on, which is why I did this video. This was because I saw people in my comments requesting it. So, you know, feel free to step down in the comments with the rest of the that is a comment requesting. That's done. If you didn't like the video, okay, I can't really do much about that, but there is a dislike button down below that you can click on. Now, I do have to warn you, though, that there's a story around these parts about what happens to folks what click the dislike button, and it's not a pretty sight. You see, it was some many years ago now that we figured out that I couldn't do an accent to save my life, but on that day a stranger rode into town. He was bleeding bad from every orifice, and as he fell from his horse to the ground, dying, nobody could save him. The doctor looked at us, and it was just clear the light was going out of his eyes. He looked at him as he whispered one thing. He said, "Beware the dislike button." And I swears to you, sometimes on the cold nights, when you hear the coyotes howling, I think of that man, and I think of what that dislike button might have done to him. And I tell my children, don't ever click no dislike buttons. It's bad luck. That's all I'm gonna say to you. Anyway, last round and then you're out. Seriously, I'm so sorry about that accent. Thank you very much for watching.